Welcome to another video coverage of This Week in Rails. I'm Dave Kimura, and today we have Greg bringing us the updates. I don't produce the newsletter, I simply provide this video coverage of it. So if you would like to receive your own copy, you can go to rubyonrails.org/newsletter to receive your own copy. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topics. And the first item is very exciting. We have, from the Rails Foundation, a conference. It's called Rails World, and it's going to be held October 5th and October 6th in Amsterdam. And that's really exciting. I probably won't attend that one since I'm in the US, and that's kind of far for me to travel. However, I'm really excited for all those who are in that area that will be able to attend a Rails conference. And for the next item, reset composite primary key and dupe. So if you're duplicating a record, you could have a situation where the composite primary key, if you remember, that's where you have multiple columns acting as a primary key. And there were situations where calling dupe or duplicate on there would create an instance where that primary key wasn't reset. And next, we have ensure pre-7.1 migrations use legacy index names when using create table. And this is going to be a very important one, especially in those situations where you have new developers coming onto your project and you've kept up to date with Rails. So what would happen is if they go to set up their environment, if they run the Rails DB migrate instead of a schema load, then they could get into situations where now there are unstaged commits in this schema.rb. And that can actually happen in many cases without these 7.1 migrations on the index names. So you do want to be careful if you are recreating your database on your local environment that you are using this schema load, because that is your source of truth. However, I do love seeing this kind of PR because it is still taking in the assumption that someone might run the Rails DB migrate and they don't want to accidentally update the schema.rb, because then that's not going to reflect what's in production. So by using the legacy names, they're going to be able to avoid that. But for any migrations created 7.1 and after, it'll then have that great benefit of the situations where you have a long index name and it's not going to raise an error when you try to run that migration. And for the next item, correctly dump check constraints for MySQL 8.0.16 and later. And this is an interesting one. If you don't know what the check constraints are, it is a way that you can add some validation at the database level, and you can check to see if maybe a user's age is over 18 or something like that. And so that way, even though you have the validations within your Rails application, it's always a good idea to have some kind of corresponding validations or constraints within the database. And so with this fix, if you are using MySQL 8.0.16 or later, then there's an issue with the check constraints. When you're dumping the database, it's going to truncate the first and last characters of the constraint. So if you go to download a database with a MySQL dump, and then you go to re-import it, you will get some errors because now some of that check constraint data has been stripped. And for the next item, only default to select primary key when non-composite. And this again is around the composite primary keys. And this can lead to a situation where invalid SQL is built when comparing a single attribute to a list of attributes. So if you are using composite primary keys, you probably already run into a situation like this, but it's great to see that there is ongoing effort to support the composite primary keys. And next, add deliver callbacks for action mailer. And so we're going to get a few new callbacks like before deliver, after deliver, and around deliver for action mailer. And this can be very useful in situations where you have a delivered at attribute on a table. And before, you wouldn't get an exact date or time that's populated for that attribute, but now with these callbacks, you are going to be able to do that. But you just want to make sure that with any kind of callbacks that you aren't mutating too many records and you're keeping it very simple, because it's when something goes wrong with one of these situations or a bug is introduced that callbacks can be rather hard to troubleshoot, especially if there's a long chain of them. And for the last item, active job verbose logging. And this is going to be a pretty cool feature because if you've ever had to try to troubleshoot jobs on your local environment, sometimes it can be a bit hard, especially if there isn't much information in the logs. And this will be a feature that's enabled by default on new or upgraded Rails applications. It's not recommended for production use as it can slow down the request because it uses the kernel caller. And so, over the past week, there are 21 contributors to Ruby on Rails, so I appreciate everyone who has helped make this framework better. All your efforts and all your contributions are greatly appreciated, so again, I just want to say thank you. Well, that's all for this week's video coverage of This Week in Rails. Thanks for watching.